Okay, so what if the whole point of school wasn't just about remembering a bunch of facts, but about learning how to actually think? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating new blueprint for education that's trying to do just that. But we're also going to look at a powerful critique that asks, are we getting it right? So let's get into it. This new vision for the classroom and some of the really important questions we need to be asking.
And this idea, right here, really gets to the heart of it. It's from the preface of a new workbook we'll be looking at. And it's simple, but it's also incredibly profound. It really captures this huge shift in how we're starting to see the purpose of education. But of course, the real question is, how do we actually do it?
For so long, for generations really, education has felt like one big memory test. But there's this growing feeling that, you know what, that's just not enough anymore. In India, for example, the National Education Policy of 2020 has made it official. It's calling for a big move away from rote memorization and a pivot towards critical and creative thinking. This isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's a whole new mission.
So, how do you answer a call like that? Well, one potential answer is a new tool called the Critical Thinking Workbook Series. And what's interesting is it's not designed to replace textbooks. The whole idea is for it to work with them, to turn these standard lessons we all had into real opportunities for inquiry and reflection. And what's really striking here is just how ambitious this workbook is. It's not just about teaching a new set of skills, it's about fostering a whole new mindset. The goal here is to spark curiosity, to develop the ability to have a respectful debate, and ultimately to help shape learners who don't just know things, but who can analyze, imagine, and even care more deeply about the world.
So we get the why. That makes sense. But what about the how? How do you actually take a regular old textbook chapter and make it a launch pad for critical thinking? Well, it turns out the workbook uses this really specific three-step method. First, it uses what it calls critical thinking questions, or CTQs. And these are designed to push students past the simple what and get them thinking about why, how, and what if. Then, and this is key, instead of giving some perfect model answer, it provides guided reflections. These are just different lines of reasoning to help students think about their own thinking. And finally, it uses debate prompts to connect everything to the bigger, messier, real-world issues.
Let's make this a little more concrete. Take a chapter on community helpers. Instead of just asking, who cleans our society, the workbook asks this: why is cleaning work undervalued in society? And just like that, with one question, the lesson goes from being about jobs to being a deep discussion about equality, respect, and social bias. It's a total game changer.
And get this, it's not just for subjects like social studies. In a math chapter about estimation, the workbook asks, how does overfishing connect mathematics with environmental decisions? All of a sudden, math isn't just about getting the right answer. It's a tool for thinking about ethics and sustainability.
So this all sounds pretty incredible, right? A practical, powerful tool to help build a generation of deeper thinkers. But what if our excitement for new tools like this is actually blinding us to a much deeper problem? What if, in our rush to innovate, we're making a huge fundamental mistake?
And that question brings us to a really crucial warning. It's a powerful counter-narrative that forces us to stop and ask what we actually mean by thinking. And this perspective comes from a scholar and technologist named Shendra Nath.
In his paper, which has the fantastic title Socrates Never Needed a Calculator, Nath warns that we're at risk of making a serious category error. He says we're starting to confuse a student's comfort with a tool, any tool, whether it's a workbook or an iPad, with their actual disciplined ability to think critically. Now, to really get his point, we have to look at this thing called the Technology Acceptance Model, or TAM. It's basically a way to measure how people feel about a new technology, and it all boils down to two simple questions. First, do you find it useful? And second, is it easy to use? Nath's whole argument kicked off when he saw studies suggesting that students who liked using a new tool, who had high TAM scores, were also better critical thinkers. And this, right here, illustrates his point perfectly. On one side, you have critical thinking, which is all about the quality of your reasoning. It's an intellectual discipline. On the other side, you have technology acceptance, which is just an attitude about how easy a tool is to use. Nath says that equating the two is like confusing a chef's love for their shiny new oven with their actual ability to cook a great meal. They're just not the same thing. And then Nath takes his argument from this academic space and makes it deeply personal.
He shares a story that's a powerful lesson in what he calls epistemic humility, which is basically a fancy way of saying, knowing the limits of what you know.
He tells this story about his wife. See, he's a technologist, so he's fluent with all the latest gadgets and software. His wife, a professor of critical theory, isn't. And yet, he admits that her deep, interpretive rigor often shows him his own blind spots. His conclusion is just so powerful. Being fluent with technology enhances your reach, but it doesn't give you wisdom.
That story just perfectly tees up this crucial distinction he makes. There's digital fluency, being good at handling devices like Nath is, but then there's what his wife has, epistemic fluency, the ability to actually justify, evaluate, and pull together complex ideas. Nat's big warning is that our education system is becoming obsessed with the first kind of fluency, often at the expense of the second.
So, where does that leave us? We've got this innovative workbook designed to make kids think, and then we have this profound warning not to confuse the tool with the thought itself. This brings us to the synthesis, to what might just be the true goal of education. And the resolution, it turns out, is surprisingly simple. The conflict we think we see, it's a false one. Why? Because the critical thinking workbook at its core is tool agnostic. It doesn't care if a student writes their answer with a pencil, types it on a screen, or just speaks it out loud. The focus is always on the quality of the human inquiry itself.
So here's how it all comes together. The workbook's questions, the ones designed for real dialogue and deep inquiry, are a perfect example of the tool-agnostic approach that Knopf is calling for. This means the real focus isn't on which app to use, it's on asking better questions. It means that training teachers in these methods is probably way more valuable than just buying new hardware. Both sides of this argument actually lead us to the same powerful conclusion. The goal isn't just to make tech-savvy students, it's to cultivate human judgment. Technology should be the servant of critical thinking. It should never, ever be its master.
And we'll just end with this question, taken directly from one of the workbook's debate prompts. It asks, do humans have a greater freedom to use nature because we're intelligent, or a greater duty to protect it because we understand its value? There's no easy answer here, which is exactly the point. Answering it doesn't require fluency with a tool. It requires the wisdom of human judgment. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important lesson of all.